we will circle Mercury for the first time. Mercury is at the very edge of our planetary group. Mercury is a little planet that nobody lives on. It is enveloped by a trap of secret and interest from the external. This world doesn't appear to be significant by any means, yet new NASA examinations have shown some surprising things about Mercury that nobody saw coming. Probably the most astonishing discoveries, like information from the James Webb Telescope, have caused banter in the scientific community. A large number of them infer that there might be outsider species stowing away on Earth. In the middle of all the crazy news and crazy conspiracy ideas, researchers are concocting a new plan: take off Mercury's bizarre covers and figure out all of its dim insider secrets for good. This is the well-conceived plan. What mind-blowing facts have researchers found out about Mercury? What noteworthy ideas do researchers have for this abnormal neighbor in the solar system? Look at this film to find out about what NASA was concealing on Mercury from the beginning, which was at last tracked down by the Webb telescope. The planets in our solar system don't simply swing around like a carousel in space. The 8 planets in this strange ring system each have their own interesting attributes. Planets like Jupiter and Mars might have gotten all the attention because of how significant they are, but Mercury is also an intriguing planet that becomes mixed up in the group when you set up planets based on how close they are to the Sun. Mercury is at the top. Earth is 150 million kilometers away from the Sun, but it is only 58 million kilometers away. Additionally, Mercury is tiny compared to Earth. Its width is only 3,000 miles. Since it has a tiny orbital span around the Sun, Mercury is the planet that circumvents the Sun the fastest. At 47 kilometers per second, Mercury makes one full orbit in just 59 days, which means that a year on Mercury is only 88 days, or about 3 months on Earth. Probably the most interesting things about Mercury are how tiny it is and how fast it moves. From far away on the big map, it even looks like a reality where people could live. Researchers have forever been intrigued by the little planet, yet it hasn't gotten as much attention as most of its companions in the system. Mercury was first recorded as a hard copy in 265 BC. In 1639, Galileo was quite possibly the earliest researcher to study the world during those early years. Anyway, researchers only had bits and pieces of information since they did all of their study with old telescopes and poor scientific equipment. Because of the work of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, real data about Mercury didn't come out until the 1960s. The first real pictures of Mercury were shown to the world by NASA a couple of years ago. These large pictures of Mercury made it look like a wonderful and complicated vast being. However, they didn't come cheaply. Researchers prepared and worked hard for many years to study Mercury, but all they could do was investigate it from afar. That's because Mercury is so close to the Sun, science researchers can't study it like they can on other worlds. When optical instruments like telescopes look at Mercury for too long, the Sun's harsh rays and bright light can damage them. Researchers can only look at the little planet for a short time at a time, so that their instruments don't get broken. The planet is so close to the Sun that not even the James Webb Telescope can look at it. It's odd that this little, close planet is harder to study than planets farther away, even though they are hotter and pull more strongly on Earth from the Sun. It's more of a suicide mission than a star mission to send a probe to Mercury. The probe needs to change to fit the temperature, air, and gravity pull of the space station. If it doesn't, it will break. You'd be stunned to discover that Mercury speeds 30 meters per second around the Sun dangerously fast. It orbits the Sun faster than any other planet in our solar system. To make sure you know, this makes it hard for satellites to study the world or land on its surface. Just 2 space missions have been able to reach Mercury so far: Mariner 10, which launched on November 3, 1973, and Messenger, which launched on August 3, 2004. These are the first ships to go to Mercury, and NASA planned both of these missions. They are the first sources of almost all the data we have today about Mercury. First off, the Mariner 10 probe did 3 flybys of Mercury. Each one showed the cracked, pit-filled surface and the magnetic field that surrounds it. For those of you who are interested, this probe had a magnetometer, 2 telescopes, spectrometers, a bright spectrometer, and a plasma analyzer. NASA planned Mariner 10's mission to gather as much data as possible. It just so happens that the probe slowly advanced toward the little, fast planet with the help of Venus's gravity. When Mariner 10 drew near to Mercury, researchers were stunned to see that its surface was so complicated. There were numerous pits and lines on it, like on the Moon. It was astonishing to see what Mercury looked like on Mariner 10, because it was so different from what researchers thought it would be. The spacecraft discovered a rough surface on the planet, as well as a weak magnetic field, and a core that was much larger than expected. Over 2,700 pictures were taken of Mercury by Mariner 10. These photos gave researchers a unique look at the planet. When Mariner 10 flew by for the second time on September 21, 1974, it took pictures of the planet's southern polar region. The last time Mariner 10 flew by Earth was in March 1975. After that, it stopped sending messages to Earth because the spacecraft had run out of power, so it couldn't make any more orbits. According to later studies, after 30 years, NASA's Messenger went to the nearby planet and continued Mariner 10's great work. Unlike its predecessor, Messenger did more than just fly by Earth. It also managed to orbit it. Because of this, researchers were able to learn some truly interesting things about the planet. With the fascinating pictures of Mercury in hand, NASA set out on this mission to gather more information. This time, it wasn't just about taking pictures. The organization also wanted to learn about the planet's atmosphere and the chemicals that make it up. NASA also wanted to explore the planet's magnetic field and learn more about its minerals and core. As you would have guessed, the Messenger probe had all the tools it needed for this important task. The probe was interesting because it orbited Mercury multiple times and took about 2,200 photos of the planet. These shots were different from those taken by the Mariner mission because they showed both sides of the planet. As part of the Messenger mission, the spacecraft got very close to the planet, about 215,000 kilometers above its surface. Since it was so close, the probe could take pictures of Mercury's bright and dark sides. NASA discovered that our dear sister planet had strangely elevated degrees of calcium and magnesium on its night side. By looking intently at the photos and coordinating them to information from the space apparatus instruments, furthermore, the planet's attractive field seems to be slanted in a bizarre way, with greater and more extraordinary fields in the north. Researchers were befuddled by this unusual pattern in the attractive field for a long time until they did a lot of study to sort out what was continuing. But when the secrets were finally made public, it stunned everybody in the scientific world. Let me explain. Mercury's odd attractive field comes from how the planet was made at its center. Worlds have attractive fields that come from processes happening in their centers. Just look at Earth, for instance. The iron in the Earth's center goes from fluid to solid as you advance toward the inner layer. It is the consistent or progressive hardening of fluid iron in the center that makes the attractive field, which is consistently stronger. Iron is being made in the center of our world as fluid iron cools and takes shape into solid iron. When it comes into contact with the fluid iron around it, a kind of convective current is created. As the Earth twirls around its center, solid electric flows are made, which create an enormous attractive field that goes all the way to space. This is the specific way that Earth works and how its attractive field lines are made. It's not the same for Mercury, though. As a matter of fact, Mercury's way of working is so peculiar that scientists have no clue how it functions. A new study led by Howe from the University of California, Los Angeles, found that iron changes from a fluid to a solid at the edge of the center. This is totally different from Earth, where the change from fluid to solid occurs at the inner edge of the center. We thought we had figured out how Earth functions, and Mercury is another earthly rocky planet with an iron center, so we thought it would work the same way. But it's not working the same way. It's like a blizzard in which the snow forms at the top of the cloud, the center of the cloud, and the bottom of the cloud simultaneously. Our investigation of Mercury's attractive field demonstrates that iron is snowing throughout this liquid that is fueling Mercury's attractive field. It was seen that as WISE study on paired data from NASA's Messenger mission continued, later hearing this astonishing news, researchers believe that planets can create attractive fields in more than one way. Earth and Mercury both have sulfur and iron in their centers, but there are a few changes between them that can make them very different, as you can see in their attractive fields. But the difference between Earth and Mercury isn't just in Mercury's attractive field. This divine body doesn't seem to follow many other rules. Researchers didn't understand why the planet's temperature could increase to over 430 degrees Celsius during the day and drop to as low as minus 170 degrees Celsius at night. Mercury doesn't have an atmosphere, which makes this weird situation possible. Mercury's exosphere isn't as thick as Earth's. Surprisingly, this exosphere is just made up of particles that were launched from the surface by solar winds and meteoroids. They think that anything that would have made a proper atmosphere over Mercury rapidly dissipates into space, because Mercury is so hot. Also, the Mercury side that points toward the sun gets extremely warm because it doesn't have a climate. Here's the most stunning part: an entire day on Mercury lasts twice the length of its year. Every day is equivalent to 176 Earth days, not 88 Earth days like people think. This means that one side of Mercury is constantly hit with intense heat and sunlight, while the night side really doesn't get much, and it's mostly a result of the lack of air and the extra long day that the temperatures are changing so rapidly. There have been a lot of wild hypotheses in the scientific world for a long time about Mercury's mysterious temperatures. Mercury may be a good place to live because it has an attractive field and rocky land, but Mercury's crazy weather conditions would make it exceedingly difficult to live there. Anyway, some questionable parts of this mysterious planet have made many people wonder if it's possible to find life on Mercury. This has led to questions like, what if Mercury is actually habitable? And if it is, what kind of living things could exist on the planet? The surface of Mercury has been cool so far. The planet looks like it has a lot of impact scars, very much like our moon. In fact, because the moon has so many pits, some of which appear to be vaults, it has been the subject of many debates and alien conspiracy theories for a long time. Although there is no evidence of these types of bases on other planets, many people have started to blame Mercury, which suggests the possibility of such species influence. Pits are usually caused by space rocks, but spaceships could also be to blame for some of them. To give you an example, NASA's Messenger probe made a huge impact when it hit the surface of Mercury on April 30, 2015. There are many pits, cracks, hills, and even signs of magma flows today. That being said, what if some of these other pits were made by similar spacecraft or activity? There are also some stunning facts about Mercury that have led to intriguing hypotheses. For instance, the ice and water that can be found at the bottom of the craters at the planet's north and south poles. In fact, another study from the Planetary Science Institute found that the North Pole of the world might be the best place for extreme life forms to live. Conditions in these habitable places are very similar to those on Earth. The only difference is that they're beneath the surface of the planet. When the pictures from NASA's Messenger probe were compiled to create a map, the result was stunning. Researchers found that some salt ice sheets on Earth are full of volatile chemicals that allow living things to survive. So, despite Mercury being so close to the Sun and having a harsh climate, these scientists believe that if we look closely enough, we might find aliens or another type of life. Perhaps the most amazing thing that NASA's Messenger probe did was create an image of Mercury that showed all the craters and bowls on the surface of the planet. This gave NASA specialists a lot of opportunities to learn more about the planet's rocks and minerals. However, that's not all. The probe also discovered what lies beneath the surface of Mercury. As it turns out, the surface of the desolate world is made up of 46% oxygen, 12% magnesium, 26% silicon, 7% aluminum, and 4% calcium. Researchers also found that the planet has a curiously low amount of iron and an abnormally high amount of volatile elements like sulfur. Banter in established researchers. Since it showed that Mercury isn't equivalent to different planets in the planetary group, it is known that planets in the nearby planet group have more iron than sulfur, particularly in their centers. Finding a planet that didn't keep this guideline was a shock, and it made Mercury more keen on itself. All in all, researchers have as of late taken note of something different odd about the planet. It has an odd ring of residue around it. Obviously, this brought more hardship. A lot of researchers were stressed that Mercury probably wouldn't have a planetary ring, since it looked excessively little to have one. The rings around Jupiter and Saturn are the only ones in our planetary group that we know about. Jupiter has a modest number of weak rings that were found for the first time by Explorer 1 in 1979. The rings around Saturn, on the other hand, are exceptionally clear and can be seen from Earth. These rings are made up of billions of little particles, some of which are a lot greater than others. They are moving around the Sun. The numerous rings that encompass Saturn are made up of both water ice and squashed rocks. The rings around Saturn and Jupiter are remembered to have formed when our solar system was simply beginning. Much more specialists feel that the way that these planets are so tremendous had a major impact. The width of Saturn is multiple times that of Earth. It has had the option to accumulate an immense number of little shakes and particles into a ring around it. Jupiter, then again, is right multiple times the width of Earth. It has around 95 moons and its own ring arrangement of tiny space objects. Since Saturn and Jupiter are so much greater than Earth, it makes sense that their solid gravitational pull and solidity assisted them with pulling in this enormous matter and garbage. Then, this makes me can't help thinking about how Mercury, the smallest planet in our planetary group, makes its own rings. The residue ring around Mercury is around 9 million miles wide. To make sure you know, researchers still don't know how these rings came to be. A lot of individuals think, however, that they may be from meteors that hit Mercury before. This thought may be valid as agreed upon by a gathering of researchers led by Dr. Peter Skillett, an examination associate at NASA. His explanation was that it is common for space rocks to continue to hit planets like Mercury that don't have areas of strength for an air. So, it's conceivable that some of these things that crashed may have sent out pieces that, over time, formed the ring of residue we see today. A lot of other researchers seem to agree with this as well. They say that Mercury's small size and thin atmosphere are likely because its surface is continually being worn out by meteors and other catastrophic events. Likewise, contrasted with Earth, Mercury's upper shell, which is otherwise known as the exterior and mantle, is exceptionally flimsy. It's something like 250 miles thick. As a source of perspective, researchers found that around 85% of Mercury's radius is made up of its metallic core. In light of this, a part of smart individuals believe that Mercury probably had to deal with horrendous things that stripped it of its top layer, leaving it as the little planet we see today. Still, these are simply surmises at this point. NASA and other space organizations still need to get more familiar with Mercury's interior to address all of its secrets. People helped the world out when the Sailor and Courier tests overcame the Sun's unforgiving radiation and vast impediments to get a brief glance at a planet that nobody believed was conceivable to reach. The Sailor 10 and Courier missions were colossal victories. Despite the fact that they may not seem significant in contrast with other major discoveries made by researchers and cosmologists recently, it's enough to acclaim these tests for managing with extreme intensity and radiation while getting readings from the secret planet. For these missions, NASA used cutting-edge advancements, some of which were even somewhat revolutionary. With today's much better technology, there are plans to go significantly deeper into Mercury and find out its deadliest mysteries. Without question, the most astounding thing about Mercury that researchers have discovered so far is its surface, which is harsh and loaded with abnormal openings. While that seems basic, there's something else to find in its secretive view. It's conceivable that there are a lot more holes on the planet than have been named or found so far. The littlest of these pits is up to 9 meters across and up to 7 meters deep. The greatest of these cavities actually depends on 963 meters across. Proposed study is the best way to truly address and make sense of this secret. This sort of study must be finished up alongside an exceptionally advanced space apparatus with state-of-the-art instruments that the Sailor and Courier space tests didn't have the capacity to use at the time. The only other space project that needs to go to Mercury is one that is being controlled by the European Space Organization and the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, JAXA. BepiColombo was the name of the thought behind this significant organization, and it went live on October 10, 2018. The pivotal spaceship has both a planetary orbiter and a magnetospheric orbiter. Its job is to concentrate on Mercury exhaustively, including its interior. It is true that the BepiColombo will reach Mercury by December 2025. Until further notice, All we can do is stand by and cross our fingers that this vital assignment doesn't go wrong. But for the present, there's no question that, compared to the other 8 planets, Mercury is slowly becoming more well-known. As far as we know, the Baby Colombo could make a tremendous finding that puts it at the top of our list of places to study in space. Thanks for watching another video. Click on the video on your screen to see more recordings like this one that will knock your socks off.